Hello, I'm Tony Mangino from TC2, and this is Staying Connected, where we talk about what really matters to enterprise customers navigating today's technology and sourcing decisions. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Larry York from TC2, and we're looking at the HPE Juniper combination, and more specifically, what it means for enterprise customers now that two suppliers that may have represented separate competitive options are part of the same company. Network World recently reported that on August 14th, a federal judge approved the Justice Department's settlement involving HPE's $14 billion acquisition of Juniper Networks, resolving the latest legal challenge around the transaction. The acquisition itself had already closed, so the question really isn't whether the deal is happening anymore, it's what changes now.
Exactly. For an enterprise customer, I think that's the more useful question. Not, was this a good acquisition for HPE? It is, what happens to the product roadmap? What happens to pricing? What happens to the competitive landscape? And if I'm already a significant HPE, Aruba, or Juniper customer, do I have the same negotiating options I thought I had a year ago?
Because there may be some very good technology coming out of this. At the same time, a stronger technology portfolio can create a stronger supplier position.
That's right. Those two things can absolutely be true at the same time.
Competition was obviously part of the regulatory discussion around this transaction, right?
It was. The Justice Department focused heavily on enterprise wireless LAN competition. The settlement included the divestiture of HPE's Instant On Business and a mechanism for licensing certain Juniper Mist AIOps source code to competitors. So the competitive impact wasn't some side issue. It was central to the government's case. At the same time, HPE is moving ahead with portfolio integration. At HPE Discover, the company announced more integration between Juniper Mist and Aruba environments, broader use of Marvis capabilities, and further development of its combined networking and SASE portfolio. There are some potentially attractive technology outcomes there, but from a sourcing perspective, the important point is that the market has changed. Enterprise customers need to redraw their competitive map.
Larry, say I've historically viewed HPE and Juniper as two distinct options in a sourcing event. Maybe Cisco is another. Maybe I have different technologies deployed across different parts of the estate. I can't just take the sourcing strategy I used 2 years ago and assume it still works, right?
That's right, Tony. And that doesn't mean competition has disappeared. It means you have to think more deliberately about where it comes from. Maybe another OEM becomes more important. Maybe you preserve competition by keeping certain parts of the architecture separate. Maybe you decide the integrated HPE Juniper portfolio is strategically compelling. But if you do, you should understand how much dependency you're creating along with that decision.
And that's something enterprises can underestimate. A supplier comes in and says, we can give you a broader platform, fewer vendors, better integration, and one strategic relationship. That can sound pretty compelling.
And sometimes it is. Consolidation can simplify operations, reduce integration points, and give the customer access to a broader roadmap. But the larger that relationship becomes, the more important the commercial structure becomes. If the same supplier is providing wireless, switching, data center networking, SASE, management, and automation, changing direction later gets harder. Not impossible, but harder. And the supplier understands that just as well as the customer does.
So what you're saying is increasing, wallet share with a supplier doesn't automatically increase your leverage with them.
No, without some discipline, it can do the opposite. You may gain operational simplicity while giving up future competitive options. That's why I'd want to understand the commercial consequences before expanding the relationship. If I decide later that I want to compete one product family, can I? Are the discounts tied across the entire portfolio? Does removing one component reprice everything else? Can I migrate a portion of the estate without effectively reopening the whole agreement? Those questions tell you much more about your future position than the headline discount does.
I'd also want to get in front of the roadmap discussion. Mergers always come with integration plans, But if I have a large installed base, I need to understand what happens to the products that I already own.
And I wouldn't wait until the renewal to have that conversation. You want to understand which platforms are strategic, which ones are expected to remain distinct, and where functionality is likely to converge. You also want to know what happens to licensing as capabilities move between products, what long-term support looks like, and whether the supplier expects customers to move toward a particular future state architecture.
Because a product doesn't have to be formally discontinued for customers to start feeling pressure to move.
Exactly. Investment can shift. New functionality can show up primarily on one platform. Support economics can change. The supplier may begin making one migration path increasingly attractive while the alternatives become less so. If that could happen during the term of the agreement you're about to sign, then it's not just a product roadmap question, it's a commercial question.
And potentially a negotiation point.
Absolutely. If the supplier's roadmap ultimately causes you to migrate, you should be thinking ahead about migration support, pricing continuity, transition costs, and what protections you need if the future state changes materially from what you were sold.
Larry, I suspect we're also going to see more bundling as these portfolios come together.
Almost certainly, Tony. And bundling itself isn't the problem. A broader agreement can produce real discounts and simplify operations. The question is how the bundle behaves when the customer changes. Let's say you get an aggressive enterprise-wide discount. Can you reduce one product family later without losing the economics on the rest? Can you move part of the estate to another supplier? What happens if HPE changes the packaging or when you get to renewal? That's where an attractive bundle can quietly become a lock-in mechanism.
So the negotiation isn't just how much discount can I get? It's also what am I committing myself to in order to get it?
That's right. And how difficult will it be to unwind that decision 3 years from now? That's a recurring issue in large technology deals. Suppliers tend to focus attention on the benefit the customer receives today. The customer also has to think about the leverage it will need tomorrow.
A lot of these purchases will still flow through resellers. So there's another layer to think about, right?
Yes. And that makes direct OEM engagement important. The VAR may transact the deal, but the OEM controls the product strategy, much of the discount framework, program eligibility, and many of the commercial decisions that shape the customer's long-term position. For a material HPE relationship, the enterprise should be having the strategic and commercial conversations directly with HPE. Then use competition at the reseller layer for the things the reseller actually controls: markup, fulfillment, services, geographic coverage, and execution.
Otherwise, you can get caught in that familiar loop where the reseller says, that's an HPE decision. And HPE says you need to work through your reseller.
Exactly. And that gap rarely works in the customer's favor.
So if I'm a large HPE, Aruba, or Juniper customer, what should I actually be doing now?
I'd start by understanding your exposure. Know where these technologies sit in the environment, what renews, when, and where you expect to expand over the next few years. Then revisit your alternatives. Don't assume the sourcing model that worked before the acquisition creates the same competitive pressure today. And finally, start asking roadmap questions now. You don't need to make an immediate technology change. You do need enough clarity to make your next commercial commitment with your eyes wide open.
I'd add one thing. If you really like the combined roadmap, that doesn't reduce the need for commercial discipline. If anything, it increases it.
Completely agree. The goal isn't to avoid a strategic supplier. It's to make sure strategic doesn't quietly become we no longer have practical options.
And that's probably the key takeaway. The HPE Juniper combination may create some very attractive technology options, but consolidation changes the competitive environment, and enterprise customers should reassess their sourcing strategy along with it. You may ultimately choose exactly the same supplier. Just make sure you're doing it with a clear view of the roadmap, the alternatives, and the commercial position you're building for the next negotiation. To our listeners, if you'd like to discuss how network market consolidation may affect your sourcing strategy, supplier leverage, or upcoming technology decisions, or if you'd like to discuss other technology strategy, sourcing, and cost reduction needs with Larry, me, or any of our TC2 or LB3 colleagues, please give us a call or shoot us an email. You can also stay current by subscribing to Staying Connected, by checking out our websites, and by following us on LinkedIn.